The schus of our learning, we should have the base of English. We're going to start today, Yud Beis, on the Beis, 12b. It's a new Mishnah. B'shama yom remain melichin chala matanis l'kain b'yomta, ben shahum me'emesh, ben shahum me'ayom b'sil matirin. There's a problem with taking Truma on Shabbos or Yom Tov. B'shama says, what's Truma? Truma, 1 second. Truma is after a person grows, he grows his grain, he harvests the grain, and he does the process. He takes the grain out of the husks. He piles them up in the granary. Then he has to separate a certain amount and give it to the kohen. How much is that amount? Well, it's either 1/50th or just 2%. 1/60th or 1/40th, depending on his generosity. That's not allowed to do on Shabbos or Yom Tov. What about on Yom Tov, if a person makes challah? He's allowed to make challah. What about on Yom Tov, he's allowed to shech? So when he shechs, there's certain parts of the animal that go to the kohen. There's raya, l'chaim, l'chiyayim, and the keva. So what do you do with them? I mean, in order to eat the dough, you have to take challah. Now, the truth is, in order to eat the animal, you don't have to actually separate them, but you should separate them because otherwise you can end up eating it. So it's not like it's matir, the food, but it does belong to him, and you're not supposed to eat it. So Beishamai says that although you're allowed to separate challah on Yom Tov, at the end you're allowed to separate the matanas that go to the kohen from the animal, but you're not allowed to bring it to him. There's a limit there. You separate it and you leave it. Bisil matir, and Bisil says, no, you can bring it as well. Okay. Now there's going to be Shammai, they only allow you to get your food edible. Don't do anything else. And Bisil says, no, you're allowed to take it. Amru lahem Bishamai. Bishamai says to Bisil, it's Gzeir Shava. It's a comparison. Rashi says it doesn't really mean Gzeir Shava, like a deraisa, because it's all rabbinic over here that you're not allowed to do this on Yom Tov. It says chala matanis. Take a look, chala and matanis, the separation of the dough that goes to the kohen and the gifts from the animal that go to the kohen. Matana l'kohen, it's a gift to the kohen. Utruma matana l'kohen, and same as truma. Kshem shem malichnas truma, kachin malichnas matanis. Just like I can't take truma to the kohen, I also can't take the matanis to the kohen. Now there's one factor that's a little bit off here that's being ignored. Truma would have only been separated yesterday, before Yom Tov. And we're ignoring that. We're ignoring that fine point, that the challah and the matanas are being separated today, possibly, if it was shechted today. And right here, at least, it's being ignored. Okay. So Amalam Beis Hillel, Hillel says, "Loi imamartim b'truma is a kai baramasa. Truma you don't take to the kohen because you can't take it today anyway. But taimra b'matana is a kai baramasa." And Beis Hillel actually brings this out, but we're still missing the point. That we're still missing that one detail of when was this animal shechted. When was this dough needed? When was this dough made? Was this dough also made yesterday? But whatever the case is, Beis Hillel says, when it comes to truma, I can't take it today. Zakai means rashai. It's not eligible to be removed today. Matanos are eligible to be removed today. So therefore, I should also be able to bring it to the kohen today. Okay. The Gemara points out the missing factor. It says, Kasal Kadaita. We're thinking that Shahurma Mehayim, when it says, Beishamai says that you can't take it to the kohen, whether it was separated today. What does that mean, separated today? Shenishkatu Mehayim. That it was also shechted today, and you still can't, even though everything is really eligible for today, because the shechita was done today, so you have to separate the gifts to the kohen today. I should also be able to bring it to the Kayan. No, Beis Shammai says you can't. B'shehurma mi'amish, what does it mean that it was separated yesterday, that you can't bring it today? Well, shenishchad mi'amish. It was also shechted yesterday. That's slightly more obvious than shehurmu hayayim that was shechted yesterday. That we don't know. Could have been shechted today. Should have been shechted yesterday. Yeah. Before. No, well, actually, the kneading. You do the kneading, and then you separate the dough. And then you make the challah. Question is, when was the kneading done? So Beis Shammai says it doesn't matter when the challah was separated, whether it was separated today or it was separated yesterday. You're not allowed to bring it to the kayan. Now, when Beis Shammai said that it was separated today, you can't bring it to the kayan. Doesn't mean that the dough was also made today, because it's Yom Tov. You're allowed to make dough. You're allowed to make bread on Yom Tov. Or could it possibly mean that if the bread would have been made today, you would be allowed to take it to the kayan? What we're really talking about is dough that was made yesterday. You separated it today. You're not allowed to take it to the kayan. Yeah, in other words, it could have been done yesterday. This is one slight detail that's not being explained. Okay, but whatever the case is, this is what we're thinking, that the dough was actually made today, and you're still not allowed to take it to the kayan according to Beis Shammai. Versus Mani Masnisin. Who's the author of our Mishnah? Lei Rabbi Yossi, v'lei Rabbi Yehuda, ela acherim. We're going to quote a brisa that's going to have three opinions. It's not going to fit with the first two, at least as we initially think. It's going to fit only with acherim. The Tanya was taught in the brisa. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda says, "Leinechtaku Beis Shammai b'sela matan shehurma me'erev Yom Tov. Shemelichin matan shehurma me'ayayim v'shenishchta me'ayayim." Rabbi Yehuda already throws us off. It seems clear that it's not our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda says like this: the machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is not about things that were separated yesterday, if you're allowed to bring them with things that were separated today, matana shehurma me'ayayim, or because of and shechted today. What does everyone hold about that? That you're allowed to bring it. In other words, there's no question that if it was shechted today, if the animal shechted today, I separate the Zraya l'chayim and the keva today. We're talking about Yom Tov, and I'm allowed to bring it to the kayan today, according to Rabbi Yehuda. But that's not it. There's one more detail, and that is that I also, while I'm going to the kayan, I had things that were separated yesterday. I can put them in the bag and bring them to the kayan because I'm going there anyway, because of what I'm allowed to do today, which is things that were shechted today. I could bring. So Rabbi Yehuda is saying that even Beis Shammai allows that. That's not going to fit with our Mishnah. No, this is a machlokes, what the machlokes is. Now we're looking for which opinion would be our Mishnah. It can't be Rabbi Yehuda. Already you see it can't be Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda allows you to take things for today. Not only you take things for today, take things from yesterday together with things from today. The whole machlokes is if I can take yesterday's things alone. Beis Hillel says even yesterday's things I can bring to the kayan today on Yom Tov. Beis Shammai done, and this is what Beis Shammai's logic was. Challah matanas matana l'kayan. The challah, which is removed from the dough, and the gifts, those are gifts to the kayan. And truma matana l'kayan, and the truma is also. The truma is the one thing that's it's telling us that it's forbidden. You're not allowed to do truma. On Yom Tov, you definitely can't take it to the kain. It's just like you can't take the truma, you can't take what's similar to it, which is the other gifts, which is either the challah or the parts of the animal that belong to the kain. Amlam Beis Hillel responds, you can't compare it to truma. Truma is not permitted to be removed today. It's permitted to be removed today. You should be allowed to take it as well to the kayan. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Now we have Rabbi Yossi giving his opinion what the machlokes is. Now, just to put out in what's going on, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel Shammai and Hillel would be teachers of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, right? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, his students are Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, the 5 students. Their student would be Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva's students are Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda, plus Rabbi Shemaiah and Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Elazar. But what's happening here is there's a machlekes Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda, these students of Rabbi Akiva. What was the machlekes of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? Not Shammai and Hillel, but Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So Rabbi Yehuda said that really Beis Shammai is not so strict because he allows things from yesterday to be brought. If they're together with things from today. Today, for sure, you could bring. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yossi argues on Rabbi Yehuda. He says, "Linechleku Beis Shammai Beis Hillel al matanos shemelichin." It's even more lenient. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel don't argue that you're allowed to give matanos to the Kayan on Yom Tov. You're allowed to take the gifts, the Zraya l'chiyayim in the keva, from the animal. That's talking about the front leg and the cheek and the stomach, and bring it to the Kayan. So what's the machlekes? Leinechleku ala truma. Are you allowed to take truma to the Kayan? Now, truma is raw grain, right? It's just like, well, you are you allowed to grind the grain? I'm not sure. You could eat it, you could toast it, and you could eat it as like toasted grains, granola. What is it? So the machlekes says truma. If you're allowed to take the truma, the grain, to the Kayan. Beis Shammai says you're not allowed to, and Beis Hillel says you are allowed to. Kachei Beis Hillel done, and Beis Hillel says like the following. It's exactly the opposite of what we were used to. Beis Hillel is the one that's giving the logic now. Chala matanas matana l'kayan. You're allowed to give chala, right? Beis Shammai agrees. You're allowed to take it to the kayan. You're allowed to give the matanas to the kayan. Truma matana l'kayan. Truma is also matana. You're allowed to give. Truma is a gift to the Kayan. Let's make a comparison. If I can give the matanas, I should be allowed to give the truma as well. Amalam Beis Shammai responds, this is the opposite sort of conversation. Beis Shammai responds, you can't compare. How can you compare it to truma? Truma, you're not allowed to separate. Matanas, you're allowed to separate. So Rabbi Yossi is saying that the machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel is where Beis Hillel is saying that if I'm allowed to give matanas, I should be allowed to give truma. Exactly the opposite logic. And Beis Shammai is responding that you can't compare truma to matanas because matanas you're allowed to separate today, so you can also bring it. Beis Shammai is agreeing to that according to Rabbi Yossi. It's just truma that you're not allowed to separate today, you're not allowed to bring today. Beis Hillel says no, there's a comparison. Acherim Maimnim, others say, usually we say Acherim is Reb Meir, but in a brisa we've seen that it's not necessarily so. We saw that once. Whatever the case is, let's say it is. It doesn't matter. Acherim say, everyone agrees that you can't take the truma. Okay. The whole machlekes is regarding the gifts from the animal. Beis Shammai says you're not allowed to bring. Beis Hillel says you are allowed to bring. Okay, Achirim did not clarify what day it's from, today or yesterday. But that's sort of similar to our Mishnah, which also said, Ben Shehumra Me'amish, Ben Shehumra Me'ayam. So the Gemara right now is saying that Beis Shammai says you're not allowed to bring the gifts to the Kayan on Yom Tov. Beis Hillel says you are allowed to. Achirim, it's the same story. You're not allowed to bring the gifts according to Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel says you are allowed to. It was going to match. Our Mishnah will match with Achirim. Yeah, exactly. Right. Right. I guess. Yeah. I guess. Yeah, that's a good point. It's not the carrying itself. It's not an issue of carrying. You're right. If the issue would be carrying, then that would be the last Mishnah. But we still allows you to carry. Here, we're talking about being misaken your food. What is it? There's a secondary issue. You're not allowed to be on Shabbos. You're not allowed to be misaken your food. It's like tikkun. It's like tikkun keli. You can't make a vessel. So you can also be misaken your food. Even be type of things like ameh or that's also tikkun keli. So here you're supposed to take all the truma and meiser from before Shabbos or before Yom Tov. Now, because you're allowed to make dough, so if you're allowed to make dough, how are you going to eat it? So they allowed you to fix the dough. If you're allowed to chef, how are you going to get the animal? They allowed you to even though that's really forbidden to fix the food in that way, to separate the trumas and meisers, but they allowed you because they're allowing you to prepare it. So to what extent are they letting you do this tikkun? Beisil says Beis Shammai says they're only letting you separate it. They're not letting you take it to the kayan. Yeah, but it's not the carrying of the Rishus Harabim that's the issue. It's the process of getting rid of it and doing that. And that's the issue. I don't think the issue here is Rishus Harabim things or anything. The issue is the tikkun. It was. The issue was which extended to Makkah. Yesterday we said because of Bitzah. The last Mishnah was about are you allowed to carry things that aren't for food? That would be in Rosh Hashanah. Now, if you're not allowed to carry, then we'll have the laws of Muktzah. If you are allowed to carry, there's no Malachas Eitzah and Yom Tov, then there's no Isser Muktzah either. There were also parts of the carbon that went to the kayan, but here we're talking about a private individual. Every time a person shechted an animal, not a carbon, he had to give a certain part of it to the kayan. He's shechting at home, yeah. Saying like kaparas. They didn't use cats, whatever, for kaparas. Talking about an example. Yeah, no part of the bird has to go to the kayan. It's just an animal. Okay. There's a big question why it's not done today. Because it doesn't seem to have anything to do with Eretz Yisrael. And it's a problem. Okay, so we say Lema Acherim Hi V'Lei Rabbi Yehuda. Am I skipping over here? No, that's where we're holding. Let's say that it's our Mishnah is Acherim and not Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said that items of today were allowed to be brought, even according to Beis Shammai. And even together with items of today, I could have brought items from yesterday. The whole Machlekes Beis Shammai Beisil was yesterday's harama, yesterday's separated bread and matanas. Was that allowed to be brought alone? That was the Machlekes Ben Rebbe. Amar Rava. Rava says, to look at the Mishnah carefully. Miktani shehurmu mehayim v'shenishchatu mehayim. Shehurmu ktani. It doesn't say, when the Mishnah says bein shehurmu me'emesh, bein shehurmu mehayim, it doesn't say nishchatu mehayim. It says it was hurmu mehayim. V'la'olam shchitasan me'emesh. Really, the shchita was yesterday, and that's why you're not allowed to bring it today, because yesterday's things you're not supposed to leave for today. Things that you could only do today, you're allowed to do today. But if you could have done it yesterday, we don't allow you to do it today. The Gemara says, wow, that's the case, that the Mishnah is allowing me to do things from yesterday, to do things that were shechted today, to bring it to the kayan, then Lema Rabbi Yehudi v'lo yachirim. We just switched the whole point of this. Turns out, if you medaya carefully in the Mishnah, turns out that things that were shechted today, you're allowed to bring them to the kayan. So that won't fit with Acherim, because Acherim said you're not allowed to bring anything to the kayan. The Gemara now analyzes Acherim. How do you know what Acherim held? Achirim maybe also holds that you're only not allowed to bring to the Kayan things that were shechted yesterday. How do you know that Achirim's talking about today? It didn't say anything about if it was shechted today. The Gemara says, well, now you're creating a problem because Yihachi Hainu Rabbi Yehuda. Because now Achirim and Rabbi Yehuda are going to hold the same opinion. They both hold. It's not going to be argument. We like arguments. No, well, it was clearly that there is an argument because they were being listed as different opinions. So the Gemara says we need to have a difference between Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara answers, well, we have a difference. It could be Nayot Tvela, Tafla, maybe. Which means if I have, if I have items that I'm allowed to bring because they were shechted today, items from yesterday I'm not allowed to bring. Let's say I bring them together. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it was clear that you're allowed to bring the two together. I'm going to the Kayan anyway. Anyone have anything here that we need to bring? Okay, you take the whole family, the things from the whole week, and you bring it to the Kayan. That's Rabbi Yehuda allows. Rabbi Meir or Achirim would only allow things from today, not any of yesterday's things to be brought, even though you're going anyway to the Kayan. Okay. Now the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Yeah.
In this case,
right. You'd have to bring it up, yeah, too. Yeah. They also only had one day. Achim holds lessons from yesterday. Take a look at this. Amar Rav Yehuda Mashmal Alacha Rav Yosi. The most lenient of all the opinions, which is Beis Hillel holds that not only am I allowed to bring matanis to the Kayan, I can even bring truma to the Kayan. Now truma was of course from yesterday, and it's yom to take to the Kayan whatever you want. It's no problem. That's Rav Yosi's view. Rav Tuvi, Breder Rav Nechemia, Havale Garba the Chamra the Truma. Rav Tuvi, the son of Rav Nechemia, had a flask of truma, of wine, of truma. I think Garba is a flask. I don't know what it says over there. A barrel, probably. Asal Kami de Rav Yosef. So he doesn't know what he's allowed to do. It's Yom Tov. Comes to Rav Yosef. Amalei, Ma'alam Tuyi L'Kayin Idna. Can I take it to the Kayin today? Amalei, Hachi Am Rav Yehuda Mashmal, Alacha Rav Yosi. Shmuel says, Rav Yehuda says, name of Shmuel. You can. V'shpezichne de Rabba bar Rav Chanan. There's a common, there's Rav Chanan bar Rabba. This must be his grandson. This must be his son. Rabba bar Rav Chanan. Havale, the Saraisa de Chardla. He had bundles of mustard. He didn't grow mustard, He didn't grow mustard, Yeah, he did. So I switched it to, because the Yavit switches it Rabba. On the side of my Gemara, I have a star that they joke that if it's with the hay, then it's Rabba. Because Yehei Shmei Rabba. Yehei Shmei Rabba. With the hay. No, it's written in my Gemara also. So he had bundles of mustard. This is the host of Rabba bar Chanan. A very big shaila. Are you allowed to do dash? Are you allowed to thresh on Yom Tov? Yeah. Yom Tov is confusing. You're not allowed to do all just because it's Eichel Nefesh for food doesn't mean you're allowed to do it. You're not allowed to plant grain. You're not allowed to harvest the grain. You can't, it is. So at which malacha does it start that you're allowed to do making the bread? There's 11 Sidur de Pas. So where does it start? He says, are you allowed to do dash? Are you allowed to take the seeds out of the stalks? I guess you would bang it or something, and the seeds would fall out. You're allowed to take the mustard seeds out and eat it on Yom Tov. Lo yav biyadei. Rabba Bar Chanan doesn't know. Asal kami de Rabba, so he comes to Rabba. Amar lei, Rabba responds, Moilin malilas mefarchen kidneys b'Yom Tov. Moilin malilas means you're allowed to roll the grains. You would roll it in your hand, but this would not be for production of making bread. This would be like more like for maybe you're going to toast it or something and just eat it like that. Once it comes out, it's edible. Same with like taking seeds out of a pod. Oh yeah. Right, could be. And this is kidneys. Now we're talking about the beans, taking beans out of the pod. So those things are allowed on Yom. Esvei Abaya. This is what Rava says. Abaya says, Hamayla Maliles Merev Shabbos. If someone took the grains out on Erev Shabbos, he rolled these grains out of the pods. Lemachar, the following day, Menafeach Miyad Liyad. You see, there's one more step to the dash. Dash is threshing. There's one more step. Zoira. I have to now winnow. Winnow works. You take everything that you just did. You got everything out. You have to throw it in the air, and you make a wind blow away all the chaff, and then the grains come down. There's different ways of doing that, but over here we're saying that on Shabbos you're allowed to do a small amount. You can blow it as you're passing it from one hand to the other. You're allowed to blow out the chaff. And you're allowed to eat it. But you can't use a knain in a tampe. Now, a knain is some sort of tube where there's a hole on the bottom, but we're able to. But what would happen is the chaff would stay inside this bulb in the tube, and the grain would fall through. Remember those little things? A sifter. Okay. Yeah, so we would catch the chaff in the center. Right. So in the tamche, a tamche is a type of plate. Is the tamche the sifter? Okay. It's a plate that was used also to this. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to use the utensils that would assist in the separating of this. Okay. Hamayla Melilas Merev Yom Tov. What happened if you did the Melilas on Erev Yom Tov? If you rolled it before Yom Tov, in other words, you separated the grain from the husk on Erev Yom Tov. Then Lamacher Menafeach al Yad Va'ichel. The following day on Yom Tov, you're allowed to separate the chaff. Afilu b'knain v'afilu b'tamche. And you can even use those utensils that would help in the separating. But you can't actually use a real sifter, these big sifters and strainers. Those you can't use because then it looks like you're doing it for many days. You're allowed to do small amounts as a Yom Tov meal. You're allowed to do it for the Yom Tov meal. But if you're going to start taking outdoor equipment to do it for on Yom Tov, then it looks like you're doing this whole labor on Yom Tov, and that's not. You're only allowed to do things that are necessary for Yom Tov. Now, one of the things that was mentioned in this brisa was Moilel Meliles Me'erev Shabbos, and then we compared Moilel Meliles, which is rolling these grains out of the husk, that we compared that to Moilel Meliles Me'erev Yom Tov, that on Shabbos, when it comes the next day, you can't use a utensil, and on Yom Tov, you can use a utensil to separate it. But what was clear was that you weren't allowed to roll the grains on Yom Tov. Now, Rava just responded to Rabba Bar Rav Chanan that you can roll the grains on Yom Tov, you can separate it. So Abaya asks, I have a brisa that says you can't. Rava responds, Me'erev Yom Tov and B'Yom Tov Lai. Okay. Rava responds, I feel it came at B'Yom Tov. It's not a real kasha because the Bryce is actually talking about on Yom Tov. I did Tana from Erev Shabbos, Tana Nami say from Erev Yom Tov. You see, the Bryce was set up with a comparison between what you're allowed to do on Shabbos, what you're allowed to do on Yom Tov. Now, when it came to Shabbos, I wasn't allowed to be Moilel Malilos to separate the grains on Shabbos. So it said me Erev Shabbos. But the point of the Brisa was to tell me about the utensil that I'm allowed to use on Yom Tov. So that was there. But because I already said on Erev Shabbos, you're Moilel Malilos, so it also says on Erev Yom Tov, you're Moilel Malilos, just for the symmetry of the Brisa. But really, if we wouldn't have been doing a comparison Shabbos to Yom Tov, it would have actually said that you can be Moilel Malilos on Yom Tov. So Tana Sefer Nami Me'erev Yom Tov. Okay, now he has another question. Imkain, if you're really allowed to be Moilel Malilos on Yom Tov, we had a whole discussion in our Mishnah that Beis Shammai is telling Beis Hillel that if you're not allowed to do, if you can't take the truma to the kayan, so you can't also take the matanas. And Beis Hillel says, well, truma you can't take on Yom Tov anyway, but matanas you could take on. It's a whole conversation. If you're allowed to be Moilel Malilos on Yom Tov, then that means that the finished product of the grains is going to happen on Yom Tov. Now, Imkain Matzina Truma Shezakai Baramasta. Turns out that you actually are allowed to take Truma on Yom Tov, because if you're allowed to be Moilel Malilos, that means to get the grains out of the husk. That means that you're allowed to eat it also. How are you allowed to eat it? If in between taking it out and eating it, there's a step which is separating Truma. So that whole conversation, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, is going to get lost because there really is a case where you can take Truma. Beis Hillel responded, you can't compare Truma because Truma you're not allowed to separate anyways on Yom Tov. So that's why you can't take it to the Kayan. Where it says like Kasha. You're right. There could be that there will be Truma on Yom Tov. But that would be the opinion of Rebbe. And our Mishnah would be following the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who's going to hold that Moilel Malilos is not chayiv in Truma anyway. Okay? The Tanya that was taught in the Brayse, Hichna Shibalim Lasis Mem Isa. You see, to make dough, you don't take the stalks. To make dough, the stalks, you make them into a pile. You separate the grains from the stalks, and then you put it into the silo. And then from there, you take it out in bundles or bags or whatever. So when is the chiyuv truma? Once it's piled up in the silo, and the silo is in the granary, the gairin is the granary, and then you smooth off the top. But if you bring it into the house as shibolim, as stalks from the field, then it's not the finished product. So you never really had an obligation to take truma. So, if you want to eat just like these stalks, you never really finish the product. You can eat from them temporarily. It doesn't become a finished product. Upater, and you're exempt from truma. But let's say you brought the stalks into the house. This is a different product. This is not grain that's for bread. This is like, well, temporary means that as a snack, not as a Shabbos meal or not as a, but if you make it into like a Sudas Keva, then it has the other laws. Like some parts Moilel Malilos would be. I'm not sure. Okay. So, now here it becomes a little bit of a problem because if you bring them into the house, not to make bread, bring them into the house because you want the grains themselves, like toasted grains or something, and you were just gonna empty that. I think the truma is by the 5 grains and wine and oil. the grapes and olive. So, Milam b'malilais, Rebbe Mechayev, Rabbi Yehuda Pater. Rebbe says that you have to take truma from this because you brought it into the house. This is not a problem of not being a finished product. Over here, this is considered the finished product. You see, if you bring it into the house for bread, then you should have taken it out of the stalks already outside. But if you're bringing it in for toasted grains, then this is the finished product. So Rebbe says that it's the finished product and you have to take truma. So Moila Malilis is chayiv b'truma. Rabbi Yehuda says no, it's pater from truma. He holds that it was never in a granary. It was never a gairan. So it's exempt. Yeah, there is such a thing. He says, Rabbi Yehuda says, it was never collected together in a pile. He never made a pile out of it. So it's exempt. What does that help us? But that helps us that we had a problem that is apparently you could take truma. If you can be ma'il malilas, then obviously, and then eat it, then obviously you can take truma. You say no. So Rabbi Yehuda holds that you don't have to take truma from ma'il malilas. The Gemara now asks a question. However, Rabbi Yehuda nami mishkachas lakin sheichna shibalim lasmem isa v'nimlach aleim l'maylam b'yamta v'tavla b'yaymi. Yeah, I'm not sure 100% how this works. Apparently, if you take it into the house to make dough, which means that it's not the finished product, but it's in the process of becoming the finished product because you brought it in to make dough, and then you change your mind that you're not going to use it for dough. You're going to use it to be ma'il malila. So it becomes somehow it enters into the process of becoming dagan. If you take it into the house to become dough, if you bring it for dough, then the process has started, but it's just not finished yet. So the chiyuv of truma didn't take place yet because it's only at the end of the production, which would be after it's removed from the husk and all of that, and piled. But if you then change your mind to be ma'il malilas, at that point you finish the production right then, as it is in the husk, right when you take it out, even before it's piled up and anything, that becomes a finished product. So we're saying that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, that says if your intention was to be ma'il malilas l'chatchila, you're exempt from truma. But if your intention was to use it for bread, and then you change your mind, so the production line finishes like on the spot, right then, so then the chiyuv truma would come, and you would be chayiv in truma. So if that's the case, then you're allowed to be ma'il malilas. It doesn't say you're not allowed to change your mind, which means that there is shayach truma on Yom Tov. The Gemara answers this. My truma, when the Mishnah was discussing truma, we were saying that Hillel says you can't take truma anyway on Yom Tov. Roiv truma, that means like most of truma you can't take it. No, normal truma you can't take. Yes, you did find one case. Okay. Amar Abaya. Abaya says machlekes b'shibalim. This whole machlekes, this discussion between Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rebbe about if ma'il malilas is chayiv in truma, you're going to use the grains just for toasted grain, not for bread. That's only by grain. Aval bekitnias divrei hakol is suraisa tabla. When it comes to legumes, to beans, then isuraisa is referring to a bundle. Once you tie it into a bundle, that's the finished product. By grain, you have to empty it out of the husks and put it into a silo. But by legumes, you tie it into a bundle, and that's the Lema Messiah. We bring a proof to this. Mishayelei chavile tilston shel tevel. Our proof is going to come from the word chavile. Chavile is a bundle. Someone that has tilson is fenugreek, and it's tevel. Harisa koitesh, you can crush it. And you calculate how much grains there are in it. And you separate truma from the seeds, but not from the wood. Now, apparently, the wood can also be used as part of the spice. Fenugreek is a spice, but the main spice over here is the seeds, not the wood. So, my love, this must be that Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehudi. It's probably Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. Now, what we're seeing is Chavile Tilson is Chayiv and Shuma. Damar Hasam Loi Tivla Hachativla. That said that when it came to the shibalim, when it came to the grain, he said that it's not hevel, that you could just eat it without taking Shuma. But by the Tilson, you have to take Shuma. Gemara says, like, it's Rebbe. It's actually Rebbe. And so therefore you have no proof. Rebbe, my area, Tilson, I feel shibalim nami. If it's Rebbe, then why does he have to talk about Tilson, which is the fenugreek? The same halach would apply to the grain. Alamai Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. Must be Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, L'shamin and Sharmi. If it's Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, L'shamin and Sharmi and Kitnias. V'kolshkein Tilson. Yeah. So why is it specifically the fenugreek? It should also be all types of kitnias, all types of grains, like you said before. What's specific about the Tilson? The Gemara says, Ella, that means we're retracting, we're going back, you're right, it's not Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, it's going to be the opinion of Rebbe. The problem with Rebbe is, why do you have to say Tilson? You could tell me about grain, that it's Chayiv and Truma. Why do you have to say fenugreek? Ella Tilson, it's Shrichli. Rebbe needs to tell me about fenugreek. Why? Since the wood and the seeds taste the same. You should also separate truma from the wood. Kamashman, that you don't have to. In other words, there's a chiddush according to Rebbe. It has nothing to do with if you take truma from something that's bundled. The chiddush is that you don't have to take from the wood, even though the wood has the flavor that the grains have. Right. Yeah. It's rabbinic, but yeah. Now, when it comes to brachas, there's a ikar and kafel. Usually don't make a bracha on the spice. Usually, the spice is food regarding truma, where you have to separate the truma from spices also. But when it comes to brachas, usually it's a whole interesting shaila about why we don't say the main part of the apple is the honey. You should say that. You shouldn't say eitz. If you're eating the apple, you're eating the honey. It's the sweetness. You should say the bracha on the. It's a discussion of that. But usually on the honey, you should say the shahakal. But yeah, usually spices is not the main thing. It's spice. It's just added. Ikada, it's just like a dressing. Ikada amri amar abaya machlekes b'shibalim av b'kitnias divra kolis raisa loitavla. Exactly the opposite. There is a machlekes where Rebbe holds that you have to take truma from the shibalim, from the stalks. Why? Because it's milo malilis. Because you're eating the grains like that. That's the finished product. But when it comes to kitnias, the bundle, everyone agrees the bundle is not the finished product. That by kitnias, you also have to pile it up in a granary, the kitnias, the legumes. Meisvei, the Gemara is a question. Mishayle Chavili Tilson shall tevel. Okay. Here the stress is going to be on the word tevel. Or at least later we're going to see. If we have bundles of fenugreek, that's tevel. That means truma wasn't taken. Reza koitesh, umachashev, kamazer yeshbem, umafresh al zer veina mafresh al eitz. You separate from the seeds, but not from the wood. My love, tevel shel truma. Apparently, it's tevel. Tevel means that it's unfixed grain because truma wasn't taken. It says, "Loi Tevel Tivel Shel Trumas Meiser. Meiser has a different halacha. When it comes to Meiser, you see what happens over here. The way it works is that the Kohen gets his Truma. Then from the owner, which is 2%. Then the Levi gets his 10% Meiser. Then the Levi from his 10% Meiser takes the 10% of that, 100, right? And he takes it and he gives it Trumas Meiser. He gives that to the Kohen. So the Kohen that ended up with 2% now has a 100, a 1% that goes to another 1% that he gets from the Levi, like indirectly, right? Not from the owner. It's from the owner to the Levi back then. Now we're saying that it's chayiv in Meiser, but it's not chayiv in Truma. Now the way it works by Meiser is, let's see, Rabavo Amar Rab Shimon ben Lakish, Amar Rabavo Amar Shimon ben Lakish, Meiser Rishon Shektimu b'Shibalim. If the Levi got his Meiser before the Truma, the Kohen got his Truma, Shmai Tavlu l'Trumas Meiser. Even though for Truma it was exempt because the Levi showed up too early, before the Truma, before the silo was smoothed up. So you're going to give Meiser, but because it gets the name for Meiser, you have to give Trumas Meiser. The Trumas Meiser is also called Meiser. It's also called Truma, but let's ignore the word Truma there and just call it Meiser. And now it's Chayav to be given to the Kohen. So when we said Tevel, we're not actually referring to Truma, we're referring to the Meiser that was obligated. The Gemara says, Kaitesh Lamali. Why do you have to crush it? The chiyuv of Truma is when it's the finished product. The chiyuv of Meiser is when you bring it into the house. If it's the Ben Levi, if it's the Levi that's doing it, why are you putting on him obligations of Truma, of crushing, of finishing the product? If that's really the chiyuv that we're dealing with, you're calling it Tevel because the Trumas Meiser wasn't taken, then they shouldn't have to crush it. The Levi should say, I got it uncrushed. I'm going to give it to you uncrushed. I'm a Rava Knasa. It's a Knas. Rava says that because the Levi went early to get it, we put a Knas on him that he has to finish it before he gives it to the Kohen. Tanya Namiaki ben Levi Shnas Levi Shibalim. Shnas Levi Shibalim. But my Sreisav, I say some Goyen. We also have a brisa that says this. A Levi that got his Meiser as a stock, so he has to make the granary before he gives it. And if it's grapes, enough of Meiser Yayin, Zaysim Meiser and Shem, he has to go through all the work before he gives it to the Kohen. Mafshalem Chumas Meiser v'Neisim LaKohen. Shekashem Shechuma Gedola Ina Nitelach Ella Mina Gayran. Just like the Chuma Gedola is only taken from a finished product of the granary, or Mina Yakev. Yakev is the wine press. Kach Chumas Meiser Nitelach Mina Gayran Mina Yakev. The Gemara asks 1 second. Truma Gedola is given by estimation, but the other things need to actually be calculated. So it says Mechashiv. Mechashiv is a calculation that's not done with actual measurements. Mechashiv Hamedida boy. It needs to be actually measured. If we're dealing with the Truma, if we're dealing with Truma Gedola, if we're dealing with the first Truma, then Mechashiv makes sense. You make an estimate. But if it's Truma Gedola, then it's the 10th of a 10th. It has to be measured. Hamani Abba Elazar ben Gimeli, the Tanya Abba Elazar ben Gimeli, v'nechshav lechem trumaschem. He holds that you calculate your Truma. B'shtei Trumas hakatzim medar v'achas Truma Gedola v'achas Trumas Meiser. Same shit Truma Gedola. He tells us by ben machshava kach Trumas Meiser. He tells us by ben machshava. Okay. Trumas Meiser has the same halacha. Should we get to the 2 dots? Gufa Amar Rabavo Amar Rab Shimon ben Lakish. We learned before that Rabavo says the name of Rab Shimon ben Lakish. Meiser Rishon Shektimu b'Shibalim Shmoi Tevel Trumas Meiser. If the Meiser Rishon, the Levi gets his Meiser, even though it was never Chayiv in Truma, because he took it and it was still in stocks, it's Chayiv in Trumas Meiser. My time Amar Rabavo Biatzal Lebshem Meiser. Once it gets the status of Meiser, so then automatically it has the status, the obligation to take the Trumas Meiser from it, even though it was never Chayiv in Truma. Okay. Tomorrow regular time, and then on Yom Kippur we'll learn 8:45 a.m. 8:45 a.m.